Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm here today to talk to you about increasing the accuracy of estimates at All Seasons Sports Center. We've all heard the phrase, mean what you say and say what you mean. Well, like, if you're having a study date and you're supposed to meet at 6:30, you show up at 6:30, the person doesn't show up until 6:45. You've now lost 15 minutes of study time. Or the dinner date that you have, where everybody just brings a dish. Susie says she's going to bring a dessert, shows up with a salad. Or how about you're getting your grandma's chair reupholstered? They say it'll be $50, show up, $250. Everybody's got Toblerone cookies sitting around, or Toll House cookies sitting around that they can use for a dessert. Just about everybody doesn't matter, 15 minutes doesn't really matter. But the difference between $50 and $250, not everybody has that extra $200. This is part of the reason why increasing the accuracy of the estimates at All Seasons is important, and why I have made this my integrated research project. Today we're going to talk a little brief history about All Seasons. We will review the problem. I'm going to tell you why this problem is important. Share some of my research with you, the data collection plan that I've come up with, and then share my results. All Seasons was started in 1966 by Tom Swisher. That's a picture of him and his wife, Patricia. It began as a motorcycle service center where he would just work on motorcycles. As time progressed, he started being a Yamaha dealer where he would then sell and service the vehicles. Today, All Seasons sells and services 6 different brands of motorcycles and ATVs. The service department, which is what my research project is focused on, is responsible for the maintenance and repair of vehicles, any warranty work that needs done, and also getting the vehicles ready. We call it a pre-delivery for when the vehicle originally moves, when it's sold brand new. The problem in the service department is that it does not pay for itself, which means the other departments, our parts department, our sales department, they have to make up the difference for that. Here's some evidence of that problem. This is just 3 ROs, where we quoted somebody 5 hours, it took 7 hours. We quoted them an hour, it took 3 hours. Just in these 3 ROs, we lost 4.5 hours. $90 an hour, that's $405 of lost profit, gone. We don't get that money back because we didn't quote correctly. The solution is to increase those service estimate accuracy, or the service estimate accuracy. The problem with looking for these solutions is there's never really been research done in this field. Nobody's gone out before and said, hey, I want to make my service department better. I'm going to find out how to increase the accuracy of my estimates. So because it hasn't been done, I had to look into research in the construction industry, in engineering, actually in endoscopic research, to see how they were increasing their accuracy, and then apply that to my research. From that, I found 3 potential solutions. First was to increase the service management training. Second was increasing my service technician training. And the last was to clarify the jargon. Training. My research, one was done in the automotive industry. It had to do with cost estimates and internal practices, training requirements. They found out that it was in those internal practices and had to do with the training requirements that caused the inaccurate estimates. That's where all the problem was internal practices. They said one of the greatest ways that they found to increase that accuracy was by increasing their training. A lot of this was through the internet. They said 92% are involved with this type of training, with internet training. Our company, the 6 different brands that we deal with, every single one of them does internet training. Honda does it, Suzuki does it, Kawasaki, BMW, Moto Guzzi, everybody does manufacturer training online. The self-assessment is another area which was part of the technician training that I had mentioned. And the self-assessment is when the technician, after they've gotten done doing a really hard job, like say they replaced fifth gear in a Goldwing, or right now there's this big recall out on BMWs where they're replacing the rod in the engine. By doing a self-assessment, sitting down afterwards and answering like 5 questions, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? It helps to transform what they've just physically done into knowledge. And once it's considered knowledge, it's something that's retained and that you can recall that information readily. It helps, self-assessment is defined as the ability to identify strengths and weaknesses. So, there are 2 types of self-assessments. There's the individual and there's the feedback. Individual would be just the technician sitting down, filling out that form, writing down what they did right, what they did wrong, and retaining that information so that they can recall it later. The feedback would be them sitting down, filling out that piece of paper, and then sitting down with me and talking to me, since I'm the service manager, and me asking them, well, why did you do it this way? Why didn't you do it this way? Really making them explain themselves. And once again, that helps to transfer what they've done into knowledge, which then is retained and they can recall at a later date. Self-assessment, they've said that accurate self-assessment distinguished successful from poor performers. So in a management position, it's a nice way for if someone does a self-assessment and it's not very thorough, I know that they're not going to be a very good performer as far as their work. So one of the things we can work on is to increase how well they fill out their self-assessment. Jargon. Jargon is defined as the use of specialized or slang vocabulary. Some of the research that I did in regards to construction estimates, they said the first step to improving the estimation process is developing a standard terminology. Use of jargon. When jargon is used, so in the service department, someone comes in, they say, I got a clink, a clunk, a clunk, whatever going on in my vehicle. It's generally up to the listener to determine what do they mean. When the customer comes in, I have to write the RO, what do they mean? When they say, I have a clunk, I have a thunk, my vehicle's wobbling, I have to decipher that. So a specialized use of jargon, a list of jargon, would help to clarify those terms. So in applying the research, step 1, if you all look at the first page, this is the commonly used service terms, the list that I came up with, the list of service jargon. We applied this. And I had customers come in, and when they said they had a weave, a wobble, a whine, whatever it was, I would give them this list to make sure that their definition was the same as my definition. This list was also given to the technicians. So then whatever word was on the repair order, whether it was a weave, a wobble, a weird smell, whatever, it was put on this piece of paper, and it was the same thing that the customer told me was put on the repair order, was then translated to the technician that was actually doing the work. Step 2 was for me to complete the service manager training. So I went on to Honda, and they have service writer training, which tells you how to properly create a repair order. I went on, and I finished that training. The measure of the progress was a statistical t-test, which basically it takes 2 different sets of data and compares them to see if there's any real statistical difference. For the list of jargon, diagnostic time was used as the measurement, because if I write down something and we all have the same weave, wobble, whatever, that diagnostic time should get smaller because we're all on the same page. For the service writer training, the estimate accuracy, so the actual estimate I gave to the customer, it's going to be 2.5 hours, $250, whatever. That was used for the measurement of the results. After conclusion of the results, if you turn to your second page, I actually wrote down the repair orders for the clarifying jargon for you, and you can see on the left side of the page is the time taken before I instituted the list of jargon. The right side is the time taken afterwards. If you look at this, the time taken, the highest numbers are at the top, the lowest numbers are at the bottom. It went down significantly. My t-test value ended up being 0.836, which was inside the limits set by the t-test, which basically means that the test was successful. That instituting this did in fact help to decrease the amount of time. The increased training results, pre-intervention, it took 1.45 hours to diagnose. Post-intervention was 1.09 hours. Give you my t-test numbers here, which I'm sure doesn't mean a whole lot to everybody, but basically it means it worked. So the two things that I instituted, clarifying jargon and increasing the service management training, they both helped to increase the accuracy of the estimates that we performed. To recap, all seasons selling and servicing 6 different brands. Service department contains 5 of the 16 employees here, and the department consistently loses money. Potential solutions for this were to clarify some jargon, increase service manager training, increase technician training, and include a self-assessment. The 2 solutions I tested were clarifying the jargon and increasing the service management training. Both showed significant results. So after I tested all the numbers and plugged them into the equations, they showed that they really did make it a positive effect. From my data for the owner, Tom, I would recommend always having a list of commonly used jargon. And not only always having a list of commonly used jargon, but possibly modifying this to brand or model specific, or a list for ATVs, a list for scooters, a list for motorcycles, so that it's a little more clear, a little more model specific, a little more, gives customers a little bit more of what they can really think of and, really expect. And of course, continue training for the service manager. As far as from my research, I would suggest instituting a self-assessment program. The reason behind this is I did not have time to institute a self-assessment program and really measure the results with the time constraints of this project. However, I do believe that a self-assessment program would help our employees sit down and really understand what they've just done and retain it, convert that information to knowledge, and do a better job next time. Thank you for listening to me. Do you guys have any questions?
Rachel, I don't have a question, but I want to thank you, being the owner. You have definitely increased the profitability, even though it's at a loss percentage. You've increased the cash flow, you've increased the productivity, and I think we have the happiest mechanics that we've ever had, because of making them more effective gives them a greater sense of value, and I appreciate that tremendously. You've done a miracle in my service department.
Thank you. No questions? Oh, yes?
Being vehicle specific, I think is very good, because different bikes, engine sounds different.
Yes.
Is there a way, when you fill out these forms, that it can be downloaded into the computer to keep an update on what time it actually took versus your quote? And then, if they do not match, is there a blank where it can be added, the the extra time, the extra half hour it took was for a rusted bolt, or do you count that as just normal?
Well,
Or I got into two things instead of one, because when you get into the second one, then your quote's shot, but there was no way for you to know that until after. But it could keep your records clean if it was something like clutch adjustment. Or you get in there and now you found out that the clutch discs are so worn that they gotta be replaced. Well, that's two different things.
yeah. What I usually do is, which the ROs that I used in here, I tried to keep them as all clean ROs. There were no additional time, no additional labor, that sort of thing. But what I've started to do in the service department, say we do get in and we're just supposed to be adjusting the clutch, and we look and those clutch plates are worn and it's going to be 2 more hours. Well, I have on record, you know, that I've quoted you, say, half an hour for a clutch adjustment. I'll call you and I'll say, look, we're getting in there to adjust the clutch, but your clutch plates are worn. They need to be
But
replaced.
then you need to convert that from an adjustment to a replacement.
So I get the okay from the customer, tell them it's going to be an additional 2.5 hours plus this many dollars in parts, and I keep note of that I talked to you on this date and I told you that it's not just an adjustment, it needs new clutch plates, and this is the time, this is the labor, and now we're all on the same page.
Is there such a thing as that you can quote a range from 1.5 to 2 hours, or 1.5 to 2.5 if we get? Can you get away with that, or will they stop you?
I quote high. I started doing that day one. I quote high. So if it's going to take 1.5 to 2 hours, and 1.5 if everything goes smooth, 2 if we get into the rusted bolts or something like that, I quote 2 hours.
And if it's 2 and it turns out to be 1, you got a real happy customer.
Yeah, exactly. I always tell people I'd rather have you come in here and be happily surprised with your bill than be steaming mad because it's $100 more than what I quoted you. I always tell people I quote high, and I found that most people really do appreciate that. It should take 1.5 hours. I'm going to quote you 2 though, just to cover my bases.
Ford and GM and all those guys seem to have, let's say, allotted times for each. Do the motorcycle people have the same? And how accurate are they?
Yes, they have what they call flat rate time. And that's how long it should take, or say in a warranty situation, how long the manufacturer is going to pay. However, age and maintenance take in a lot of account, like you have to take those into account when it comes to a motorcycle. Because if you have a 1984 BMW that's really been taken good care of, and you just need to change the rear tire, everything's great, things have been lubed and whatever, it only takes a half an hour. But if you have a 1984 BMW and it's been sitting in somebody's backyard and it's been rusted and things are corroded together, it's going to take longer. So, age does have a lot to do with it, but like newer vehicles, 06 and newer, 90% of the time, oil change, $45 plus the price of parts. Nothing real exciting. So, but yes, there are the flat rate times as well. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you all being here.